All right. What are my buttons? How am I doing this? Hi, everybody. I, as I hope you know, am Pat Scott. I am the developer of Destination Ares. Though, of course, that's not the same guy. You might know me better by any of the looks that I've had over the course of the last 3 years. They've varied a lot. You're going to see a few more of those. I have fun with it. My hair grows fast. What can I say? All right. So we are here today to talk about Destination Ares and everything that went into that. Before I talk too much about the game, let's start with the trailer.
We are the children of a choking world, cast off into the unknown. As we face this expanse, the rattles of the hull and flickering of lights are confessions of our fragile vessel. Despite her best intentions, she might not be able to birth us at our destination, the Red Planet, our new home. We are in the hands of her algorithms and neural networks. We are at the mercy of her AI. Every day we follow its instructions, little workers for the queen of this lumbering hive, as we inch closer to salvation.
All right, so thank you. So that's Destination Ares. It is a resource management colony sim. It released on Steam and itch.io after 10 months in early access, just like 3 weeks ago. It finished up, is now out. And this is kind of to detail that whole process and all the thoughts and all the dirty details, which is exactly the question is a postmortem. The game's not dead. It just came out. That's right. It just launched. So what we're going to be talking about today is everything from the beginning of that to the end of that, of the process to get that to happen, and even a little bit going outside the bounds there. We're going to walk through from the beginning to the end. I'll even go into some finances and all the dirty details and some deep, dark secrets about indie dev that don't get talked about enough that I feel we should all kind of address. Buckle up. This is a long ride, and I'll take questions and stuff a little bit. I should add, a lot of the stuff I'm not going to do a lot of deep dive on. I don't have time to go through everything, unfortunately. I do talk about more stuff of the process and what I was thinking in a blog I did while I was developing. And that's all available on the archive. It's going to be up for a while. All right. So I will say this was largely a solo project. I did hire a composer, Arkim Schultz, to do the music. He's from the film industry, did a fantastic job. But other than that, this was me, right? I intentionally went into this saying, I am not going to buy a lot of assets. I'm not going to, the goal is to be zero budget and just kind of be as limited and tight as I can on this and learn as much as I can because I'll go into kind of my background here. I've been making games since I was a kid. These were a couple recent things I did. I did a lot of board games, analog games, RPGs, that kind of thing. I had run a Kickstarter in 2014 for King's Favor here on the left. Ended up turning that into a self-publishing thing, released it on the Game Crafter. And so that kind of was where a lot of my background was. But I had been getting my chops in mobile for a few years. I was working with a business partner. We had published probably half a dozen games in that time. And mostly it was us kind of learning how to do this, right? Towards the direction of going professional. Kind of my goal was, kind of doing all this semi-professional dev along the way. But as partnerships go, eventually, that burned out a bit. Things suck sometimes, and people have disagreements, and especially when you're working with a friend, that can hit you. These were a couple of our last projects we did, going right up, leading to Destination Ares. The one on the left here was Happy Happy Putt Putt. This was going to be our first commercial release. So up until this point, we'd had our best app had done 50,000 downloads in a year, which was not a lot, especially when it was only ad-based. This one was going to have actual monetization in a serious way. We ended up parting ways about a month before its release, which sucked and made me very angry. So I decided, fuck this. Oh, sorry, by the way. language warning. It's a little late, but it's going to happen. I said, all right, I'm moving on. I need to work for myself for a year or two, kind of get my bearings, see if I can really hack this on my own so I know the full stack of everything, and I'm not reliant on someone else. And then I had this idea. I always had ideas flowing. And this is a copy of my original Post-it note, and I still have it. It's a little sticky note. And if you read this, I mean, this seems pretty close to the original idea I had for the game and what the game became, right? Other than the start colony part, which if you want to start a colony, go play RimWorld. That's the next phase, right? But this is the game, with a few tweaks and additions and more aesthetic to it, obviously. But yeah. So some of my inspirations for this. Oh, we're gonna move. We're gonna move. Can't talk about inspirations without having them pop up. There we go. So obviously a lot here. I'll go over them pretty quick. Oregon Trail, the whole idea of the journey, starting with everything, running out, dying. Faster Than Light is one that a lot of people associate the game with. It has the same aesthetic, and a lot of what I did actually was based off Faster Than Light and going, how can I do this differently? How can I react to what Faster Than Light did? And I'll go over that more as we go along. But there was also some less obvious things that kind of took place in how I was developing this. The Firefly board game had some really cool mechanics with their crew character cards that gave them bonuses to all their activities and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. Space Station 13, best game of all time. It's really an awful game, but it's my favorite. It has awesome chaos. It gave the game a lot of irreverence and a lot of just kind of this weird kind of energy that I really loved, that I really wanted to capture. Kind of a big inspiration for where I was moving. And of course, the Mars trilogy kind of informs a lot of the politics. This is a novel series, and fantastic. Out There was the original direction I was taking with the resource management system. Ended up throwing it out, but it was still seminal in where I started and where it was going. And of course, Dwarf Fortress, and by association, RimWorld and The Sims for all the colony management stuff. The idea of the crew not being under your thumb. It's not an RTS. You don't get to say, go here, do this. It's very much, they're doing the things, and you're like, oh, crap, I need help over here. And then something will happen. And being responsive to kind of the emergence there. Of course, all of those games have had larger teams, a lot more time. So I was doing it on a smaller scale in a more directed way to kind of get at the core experiences that I wanted from those. Eventually, so I have Sunless Sea and Undertale on here. I should add, these didn't come out until about a year or so into development of Destination Ares. So I didn't play them until well into, I've already committing to this project. But they both ended up changing the way this game was going in a major way. Sunless Sea kind of reinforced a lot of the aesthetic and kind of helped me realize that I could go dark with this game in really cool ways that kind of like hinted at more stuff and really kind of reaffirmed the whole narrative structure for me that I was kind of tapping into a little bit at the beginning, but I could add more to it. And then Undertale, very different game, as we all know, but it had this really cool mini game, which was a bullet hell. Now, I'm not a big fan of bullet hells, but it worked really well for the core of the idea, and it allowed the player to really interact with the world and decide how things were going to fall out, based on how they did in the minigame. So when that happened, I'm like, I could do something like that in my game. I was looking at Faster Than Light. I was like, wait, Faster Than Light has all of these events popping up, and I just click through them. I just don't care. I know the best option, and I do it. And that's it. It rolls the dice, and it tells me what happens. And I didn't like that. I wanted there to be more choice. I wanted there to be more, oh, shit, this is happening, or like, how do I react to what's going on here? And I'm like, I can throw a minigame in. So I happen to really, really love Minesweeper. And so I used Minesweeper as my minigame, as kind of the base architecture around which I built. And with the idea being players then would be able to change the course of events based on their own actions. Put a little skill in a game with a lot of RNG. So obviously that's a lot of crap that is kind of getting thrown together in a weird way. This is a new, unique take on a lot of different things. What the hell was I getting myself into? Good question. A lot of fun, I hope. But there are personal struggles that I should talk about. I forgot about this slide. So I have depression, and these were constantly cropping up in my development. So I have days where I just don't want to get up, where I just don't want to work, where I just can't deal with whatever's going on. And this is something that I find is frankly, fairly prevalent, thank you, in this industry, but that we don't talk about enough, right? A lot of creators suffer from stuff like this. In my case, I have to kind of pay attention to everything I'm doing. I have to practice a lot of self-care. If I work a lot, I really love life. So when I'm in the flow, I just keep it going. But if I take a big weekend off and go on a trip, I lose my flow. And if I don't work enough in a day, I get really down. Or if I work too much and then I don't exercise, I get down. Or if I forget to eat, I get down. And all of that can throw me off for weeks. So I had to be very vigilant about that. I kind of set a goal for myself saying, every day I do 20 minutes. Doesn't matter, just sit down, stare at the goddamn code, bang your head on the desk, don't care, 20 minutes of work a day. And then if it catches and I get in the flow, fantastic, keep going. If not, well, I have plenty of other things to do with my time in my life. So that's fine, move on, other days will matter. So it ended up meaning I had days that were 20 minutes long, or I had days that were 14 hours long. Usually they were about 6. I also have a sleep disorder. I am generally nocturnal. Like I went to bed at like 7 last night in the morning. What that means really is though my clock is actually around constantly. Eventually I will flip and be diurnal again, but it tends to stick to being at night. There are some advantages to that and some disadvantages, obviously. Disadvantages are side work's a lot harder to manage. Traditional jobs are a little bit weirder for me. But the advantage of that is creative work is fantastic. And I have all the time I want on my own hours where I'm not getting interrupted in the middle of the night, which I really enjoy. And I happen to really like nighttime. And then, of course, financial limitations. I am a tiny indie, and I was making about $2 to $3 grand a year while I was working on this game. A year. Obviously, that's not enough money to live on my own. So I had foregone the idea of having a real job. I'm doing full-time development on this. So my parents said, hey, we didn't help you through college because I ended up getting scholarships and grants. This is a way we can help you out. It ended up being great because it meant I was less isolated. I was around people, and hey, who doesn't mind roof over the head and 1 or 2 meals a day, right? And then I also, they're less isolated, kind of creates a cool space. Of course, the secret is, for a lot of indie dev, someone's bankrolling you. Someone's supporting you in some way. Either you got a publisher paying your money, you're coming in with a lot of money from your own previous projects, or you've got family, friends, or a spouse who is working a regular job or has money to make sure you can do this. There's not a lot of opportunities. I'm very privileged to be able to tackle this with little means. I know that that's still going to hurt me, but it's still very much like most people don't get this opportunity. So I had to take it, and I was very happy for it. There we go. So I also came into this with a lot of tools and skills. I knew a lot coming into this. I've been working in games for a while at this point, and I had kind of developed a lot. I'm very fast self-learner, and I made a point of kind of like pushing a lot of that. I knew there were things I needed to freshen up on and really like tighten up. Coding, I forgot completely how to code before I walked into this project. I needed to teach myself from the ground up how to write in a language I'd never used before. It went well, but it was something I knew I needed to handle. But there was a lot more that I didn't expect coming up. And frankly, there was so much more that I can't fit it on the page. So I ended up getting a lot more tools under my belt, a lot more skills under my belt, and just generally had, by the end of this, things that I never would have expected. Of course, I expected needing to work with Steam. My target was Steam, but I didn't expect how much of a pain in the ass Steamworks API was going to be, or anything like that, right? And so, and email etiquette. I didn't know how much I hated writing email. I hate writing email. It sucks. So now I just like vomit on the page and send it, and maybe they like it or not. I don't care. People who are okay with casual stuff like me better, and I like them better for it. All right, so let's talk about the timeline of this whole process and where those tools took me and what that meant. So at the beginning of the project, I set out and I said, you know what? I expect that there's going to be 8 points, 8 phases of development for this whole project to see it from beginning to end. So first was the travel game. We're talking about having just the ship, some crew on it, some systems, and there's events that are popping up. It's not a big simulation going on, but the idea is that stuff's happening, player can react to it, and eventually, it runs out, whatever. It's the base game. It's the core loop. After that, I was going to follow that up with ship customization. Now, this is thinking forward to when I wanted to do full customization, where the player could build their own ship from the ground up. This was including stuff like, kind of unifying the idea of how whole pieces were built and systems, and like making them all kind of one unit so that it was very easy for me to reprocess things later. So this was a lot of, I knew where the design was, and I just needed to kind of enforce that design on the work I'd done. Likewise, crew customization, adding those roles for crew, but adding more than that, adding new ways for players to interact with the crew, talking about their colors, talking about their personalities, and with that going, all the speeches that they can have and all the ways they can talk to the player. So all of that was planned in here for the eventuality that players would be able to, play with it and build their own. So after that was kind of the biggest midway milestone. This is when I expected to have a demo. So this is kind of, again, another enforcement phase where it's saying, OK, I need to take all of these things that I did do, and now I need to make them actually into a functional game. Or, put a menu in, kind of get everything processing, and throw it together, have something presentable that isn't just running in my dev environment, and that I'm not only showing to friends and family. After that, I would follow up with full customization, allowing players to build their own ships and really kind of flesh out their design. And for me, this is the other half of the game. This is the part I was really excited about. There was a lot of cool emergence that I wanted to chase down in the early parts, and then in this part was where I would have the most fun playing. So, and of course, you see plus events here. This is where I'm adding a little extra content as I'm going along. After that phase is revise, test, revise. Of course, I was revising and testing all the way along, but this was explicitly the phase for polish. This is the one that's supposed to ramp right up to launch. So this is the phase where I am doing, the focus is how do I tighten this game and get it to the place it needs to be, and really, again, an enforcement phase of enforcement of the original idea. Finally, launch. Launch, of course, being the marketing ramping up to it, all of the management of, all the software and everything that needed to go into all of that, and maybe some last content, all that kind of stuff. If there was an 8th step, there is an 8th step, and that's where I'm at now. So we're basically talking about 1 through 7 today. 8 is future stuff if time and budget allows, right? If the game gets picked up enough, or I have the inspiration enough, come back to it, revisit it, do a DLC, or just do a free expansion, that kind of thing. So how did I do? This is the timeline. So this is the real timeline, roughly speaking anyway. You can see down in the bottom here, it starts in July, but it starts in August is when I started the project from 0. It took me about 5 months to get to that first travel core game done, which was really fantastic. So again, my goal here was in 1 or 2 months, commit to this, see if it catches, see if I think I can finish this in a year or most 2. Of course, this is 3 years, but I'll find that out later. And then see if I can stick with it and finish it, and then have a demo out within the year. And so at 2 months, I started my blog. This was my first step towards marketing this game, and this was my first step, this is when I committed to the game. This is when I said, put it out in the world, announce that this is being made, and I can't wait for you to play it. So I committed to every 2 weeks posting something about game design and tying it back into my game, or being directly about my game. And I did that all the way until the last couple months before launch, where I got too swamped. And I can't wait to go back to it, actually, at some point here. So after that, 5 months, I hit what I'm doing, and then I end up doing ship customization and crew customization. I flip them, doesn't matter. And by the end of that, I'd really done a lot. I felt like really good. That was probably the happiest time of development, when everything just flows and, hey, like, I'm good at this, right? Well, reality was about to smack me, but I didn't know that yet. But at this point, I had finished, I had decided, look, I've iterated and I have revamped my art style a few times already, and I needed to settle on something that I was going to be happy with all the way to the end, because as I was adding more content, revamping was more costly. right? And with that, I also ended up designing the color palette, and I'll go into all of those things a little bit later. And that's kind of the end of year one. I kind of figured I'd be releasing a demo by this point, but then I was stuck in this long slog here, that long orange line. But what happened there was I had this saving system that I didn't expect, right? That I ended up making a bespoke saving system using BSON that was fantastic for certain things. It allowed me a lot of versatility in what the player was able to do with their saves and what I was able to give the player to do with their saves. It also allowed me to, eventually down the line, if I wanted to, port to mobile. So at the time that I was setting up the saving system, there weren't a lot of options out there. And most of them had a lot of drawbacks. This one was, it's very verbose, and it takes a lot of work. And it was also very fragile. I was very bad at this, making the saving system. It took me several months. And I ended up corrupting things and crashing things regularly. And this was a very bad time for development. But got through it, would put a few more months in later for adding more content and stuff like that. And ended up having a saving system that was fantastic, that even when the game crashes or anything goes wrong, it's very responsive, and the player, when they pick it back up, is right where they left off. And it ends up being very robust from a player's point of view. After that was menus. So between these two, they took 90% of the time to demo, right? Of course, throwing everything together to make this demo, I needed to have game traversal. I needed to have ways for the player to set options, to enter the game, to exit the game, and have all of that sorted, and all the other menus that went along with that. And the multiple screens that, like, jumping from minigame to the main game, that kind of thing. So that took a few months to kind of get the first draft out on, and then I released the demo shortly after that. And shortly after that started Greenlight. I should mention here, when I started in August 2014, being on Steam as an indie was like fantastic, right? You're gonna get paid. You're gonna get fucking paid. But yeah, at this point I realized that probably wasn't gonna happen. Even if I shipped that day, the world had changed. But still, I was committed to Steam. There's still a prestige on being on Steam, and there's still a lot of work that goes into being on Steam that kind of makes it worthwhile. So I started that process, and the end of year 2 rolled around. Of course, the end of the year being August in this time scale. And a little bit after that, Greenlight was successful. I spent 43, 42, I don't know, 40-some days in Greenlight process. Came out the other end, one of the happiest days of development. Just like was crying my whole way through those 40 days. I get the email that I wasn't expecting because, hey, it wasn't going anywhere, it wasn't moving, but I got bumped off the list. Hey, congratulations. So, hell yeah. Greenlight's successful, life's good. Of course, shortly after that, we all know they moved to Steam Direct before I finished launching the game. And kind of made that whole point moot, but I did it anyway. So at this point, I finished customization, and I felt like the game finally clicked. I had both halves of the game. The game was a unified whole. I had menus, I had saving. There was a whole experience, and it had had enough polish that I started to feel good about this game. Now, this is scary. Look at this timeline. I went from, I'm going to do this in a year or 2, and here I am after year 2. I only had a demo out 6 months ago, and I'm now finally getting to the point where I feel like the game might be okay. What the fuck was I thinking, right? So the thing is that it's a simulation game. There's a lot of overhead that goes into making one of those. There's a lot of things to calculate. There's a lot of systems to build out. You're not plugging and playing a platformer, physics system that you can tweak down the line. You have to make sure you get there's not one mechanic that you have to get tight and so it feels good. You have to get everything working and then twist all the knobs until it feels like something's there, which is, part of the process on this game. I don't recommend tackling something like that, but it was definitely something I wasn't surprised by going into this. I'd already committed to this project, sink or swim, do or die, whatever. So this was just part of that process. It clicks, I'm stoked, early access, fuck yeah. So launch early access, immediately get panned. Don't get the feedback I want, right? Here I'm hoping people hit the forums, go, hey, this isn't working, it's early access, indie developer, we'll help them out. Nope, nobody said anything cool on the forums. Instead, they went straight to the reviews, said, fuck this game, and refunded and bounced. Never came back. Real heartbreaker. But it got my attention. It said, look, this is what I need to fix. All right, cool, now I know, right? So move on from there. Just a little bit after that, I had my first major showcase at WGF at UCSD, Winter Games Fest. I had already done a few like more semi-private, semi-public showcases before this, demo days and stuff like that, mostly with developers in attendance. This is the first one where I am not only public-facing, but 1,000 or 2,000 people who I don't know, who are gamers and don't understand what this is and what's going on behind the scenes here, and they're going to play it. And this was exciting. So I ended up doing a few showcases after this, but this also helped a lot. This was a great spot for me to do blind playtesting. This was a great spot for me to start having a public persona and start feeling like I could do these kinds of things, like what I'm doing today. And then that's kind of, I end up finishing the revise phase, year 3 ends, and we're here today. So that's how that went. Of course, yeah, I need to take a breath. Let me get a drink of water. That was a lot. We're about a third to halfway there. Hope you're ready. All right, so that's the timeline. We're going to dive down into some of the decisions and some of the challenges and some of the things that actually happened along the way that kind of gave me that whole curve, right? So I had a lot of things that I wanted to tackle in this. I've kind of hit on a few of them. First of all, I realized that we have a lot of games these days that are really long. You play for 80 hours, you play for 120 hours, and you get to the end of the content, and they release the DLC, and it's another 40 hours. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, that's great. You really get invested in the world. But, you know, and the other side of that is Candy Crush. All right, right? Cool, but like, there needs to be something else, right? There needs to be something for the 30-year-olds starting a family who don't have time, right? So, and this is something that we're getting talked about more, but this was something I had set out, like, I'm going to do this 3 years ago. And I'm really glad I did, because I'm seeing more of that pick up now. So the goal of this game is 30 minutes, win or lose, right? If it goes to 45, cool. Who cares, right? If a player's slow, they can go to an hour. But it never goes longer than that. Compared to FTL, where you lose in half an hour, but if you want to win, it takes 4 hours, right? And that sucks. Not everybody has that amount of time to commit to one run. So my idea was kind of the roguelike style. You go in, you die, you do it again, you do it again, you do it again. And you kind of iterate on what you're doing. And kind of appealing to a little bit of an older demographic. I also wanted to kind of push back on some other things that I see in the industry. There's a lot of violent games out there. Now, I love me my violent games. I love to go shoot people in the head in a game. But that can't be the only thing that's out there, right? So I pushed, kind of this idea of you're the AI. You're not trying to hurt everyone. Even if you're HAL 9000, as people sometimes say, your goal is maybe brokenly still in their interest, right? There's no actions you're taking that is killing people, that's intending to kill people. Your actions are all done to kind of progress, and it's working against the environment. It's a fight for survival against space, and part of that is also the internality. So we have games like FTL again, where it's about growing in power. You're the hero. Yeah, as you get further along, you get better, even though you're running for your life. And you're shooting aliens and stuff like that. No, let's do a game where all the stuff is inside, right? As humans, our lives are lived in our own minds and in our circles. How do I reflect that in a game? And as a character that's not human. So life aboard a ship, and sometimes stuff happens to the ship from outside, but ultimately it's about, kind of this whole experience being internal. I also played with pixel art. Remember, I committed to my design on the art pretty early in the cycle, in this development. It's kind of hard to see with the light. So I did what I call modified pixels. So, of course, today our graphics engines are pretty good. You're not stuck with pixel art. And most pixel art we have today is false pixel art. Every pixel takes up quite a few pixels on the screen. I thought, why not play with that? So at the time, pixel art was hot, and it was getting hotter. People were really stoked about it. And I'm like, if I do this in a year or two, that'll be great. I missed the mark by a year. I was a little late, and now low poly's vogue, but that's fine. Whatever, I did it. I'm really happy to have done it. I ended up playing with, so I ended up having this little circle gradient in the middle, and then kind of goes out to a darker rim. It creates a lot of definition to each of the pixels and kind of delineates them. And what's great about that is it gives me a lot of, it allows me to have a lot of character and a lot of detail in very low resolution pieces. I mean, that character is what, like, not even 16 by 16, right? And with a little bit of animation, he comes alive. And that's really hard to do at that scale. So that was a lot of fun for me. And the downside of that is, of course, how the hell do you make those kinds of pixels? Well, you can't do it in Photoshop or any other pixel art kind of program. I did it in Illustrator. And Illustrator sucks for making pixel art. It has no tools that are even close to appropriate for making pixel art. So it was a slog, and it also had, I was using CS6, which has a RAM cap. It doesn't use 64-bit or anything like that. So it goes, I got 1 gig of RAM, I'm done. And when that happens, you lose the whole file. So I was limited to smaller scale. I couldn't do big backgrounds in this style. I couldn't do pieces larger than like one of the ship components, right? Which kind of was very limiting. And that was kind of weird to play with. There was just too many gradients on the screen, too much going on. After that, I also chased down color palette. So I mentioned this earlier. One of the jokes I had, an early copy for this game, was candy colors are for candy games. Of course, I kind of went way too far in the other direction. I said grayscale and 3 colors with a few shades of each color. That's it. That's all the colors that are in the game that you're ever going to see in the game, period. And in all the marketing I do, I stick to those same colors. And I played with how I use those colors. Initially, I threw color at everything and didn't use grayscale very much because, fun fact, grayscale is wrong. You're not supposed to do grayscale in straight gray. You should have a little bit of a color to it. We all know this as artists in the room, those of us who are. I did this because I said, fuck that, I'm going to do what I want. And I'm an AI, so it doesn't matter. Everything should be bleak and weirdly clean and yet dirty at the same time and very digital. So I went grayscale, and I stuck with the elementary colors. These are the colors we use for kids' toys when they're below 5 years old. You're a newborn AI, right? So you have to live in a world that has newborn colors. Red for the blood, yellow for the electricity and the utility of just like industrial components on your ship, and blue for the coldness of space. And initially I had thrown these colors at everything, and what that ended up doing was the colors were too much. You didn't care for them. It was just like, all right, I'm looking at a kid's toy. When I stripped all of that down and pushed hard in the grayscale direction and just did little spots of colors here and there, the colors really popped. And I ended up sticking with that and really loving that aesthetic. And to me, it really played well with the whole idea of you being an AI. So I also wanted to push realism. This game does not look realistic. I know that. You know that. I hope you know that. But it does, under the hood, take a lot of lessons from the real world. My idea here is I'm a big fan of going to Mars and seeing where humanity can go and what we can do. And I signed up for Mars 1. I went to go die on another planet, right? They didn't accept me, so instead I made this. But I'm like, what does that look like, right? How will we do that as humans? Now, this game's hard. Space flight is like normal flight in some ways, where it's the launch and the land that suck, and in the middle is kind of safe. This game doesn't have a launch and land. It's literally, everything takes place while you're in flight. So I ramped up the difficulty a bit, obviously. But it's also kind of this idea of, these aren't the first settlers to Mars. These are the 3rd or 4th generation. First generation are the pioneers, the ones taking the risk. The 2nd generation are, oh, life's safe and everything's good and we've figured out how to do this, and it's the luxury cruises and the businessmen. And then the 3rd and 4th generation is, I need to get the hell off this planet how do I do it? I need to like, grab a bucket of bolts and like steal satellites and bolt them together and throw the ship into space. You're not doing a correct transfer ellipse. You're doing a straight burn to the planet. You're not waiting for the right time of year. You're just gonna go. Your ship's not designed for this trip. Your crew are not professional astronauts. Everything is going to go wrong and does go wrong. And that's where I kind of like brought it back to this whole realism. And then, so I'll go into some more of that later. I also, with that, want to do up the difficulty curve. I'll go into more of that later as well. And as the AI, I wanted to kind of enforce this idea of dissonance. Now, when literary academics talk about dissonance, they're talking about where the audience feels separated from the content, where they get broken away from the story and get disillusioned by the whole thing. But I want to artificially induce that within the context of the game. So I wanted the player to feel like an AI, feel a little inhuman, feel like something was a little wrong with this game that kind of irks them in the back of their mind. It's not a great move for a commercial game, but to me it was very important for the artistic expression. And so I did a few things with that. I mean, I did a lot of things with that, but I'll go over a few here. I'm not going to really talk about names. I ended up using a lot of sci-fi stuff that really inspired me. But for genders, at first I was really like, I'm going to put genders in the game. And I thought about it more. I'm like, why am I going to put genders in the game? The player doesn't care what that meat bag is, whether it's got those parts or these parts, or thinks this way or thinks that way. The computer is a computer. It's a human. Give it food. Give it a toilet. Give it air. Who cares, right? Genders don't matter. The crew are explicitly genderless. I still catch myself sometimes going, hey, look, he or she or whatever, because I'm acculturated as a human to think that way. But I wanted the player to kind of never make that connection unless they knew the context for the name, right? All right, we're skipping ahead, but I'll do them both. So the next thing I want to do was camera effects. I wanted to kind of make the player feel like they were looking through a camera at the game, right? So I ended up I played with saturation, I played with contrast, and I also tilted the ship. This is a 2D game, but I actually move things in the 3D world on 3D plane just because I'm like, fuck it, like let's make it look like things are actually moving and happening and kind of changing. I ended up, I did fisheye bowl, so it looks like you're looking through a camera, vignetting, some color gradients. I ended up having, probably at the peak, probably like 20 different effects going on the camera. It's about half that now. And then I also wanted to make the player feel like they had limited action. At the end of the day, as the AI on a ship, you're the second-class citizen, if you're a citizen at all. You're the crew's bitch. They expect you to do all the things that they want you to do, right? So I wanted to kind of enforce that, right? You're not in charge of this voyage. Sure. You get to decide if they survive or not. You get to run everything. At the end of the day, you're the most important person on the ship, but your life doesn't matter and your opinions don't matter. They're going to yell at you. They're going to be happy with you, however the hell they want to feel. And they're not going to listen to you. They'll go, oh, there's an alarm. I'll go take care of that. I better fix that. The computer thinks something's broken. But other than that, they're like, nah, my business is my business. And with that kind of went a little bit of a delay action. So you can set an alarm on something, and the crew may or may not see it in time, right? Something can go wrong, or your system can break down, or the communication system can lag, and in ways that can make sense to the player, in order to kind of like enforce this idea of you are just stuck in your shell. And of course, the fucking minigame was very intentional. I was talking about it earlier when I was talking about Undertale. And yeah, we'll go over that here in a second. So I had a lot of challenges with these designs. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff there that are going to throw a wrench in everything you want to do if you want to make money on a game. First of all is that minigame. That minigame is very love-hate. Players who pick, it's very rarely that people are like, yeah, I don't care. The minigame's fine. People are usually like, fuck this minigame, or I love that minigame. Can I play this all the time? And it's weird how that falls out. I didn't expect that. I have some ideas, but we'll go over that. So players who can play Minesweeper and on expert, or players who can beat it, players who know Minesweeper and can grok that whole thing, do well and love the minigame. They pick it up like, oh, this is Minesweeper. I got this. And maybe they do or maybe they don't because I throw some wrenches at them, but the idea is the same. And they love it. They really get engaged with it, and they think it's a cool way of changing the course of their path through the game. However, players who think they're good at games, players who've been playing games since they were 2 years old, have played all the AAA games that have ever come out and just about nothing else, and expect their hand to be held and to be taught everything along the way, go, what the fuck is this? They don't know how to learn, right? They have a bunch of knowledge that they've built up over many years, and I know I suffer from this as well with a lot of different styles of games, but in this case, it got in the way of them understanding. I would actually put it right in front of them. I would sit them down and I would stop the minigame and I would go, this is what you need to do. This is what this game is. It's Minesweeper. Don't do this, do this. They didn't get it. They didn't understand what the game was. And it wasn't intuitive. It was taking things in a different direction that didn't make sense. Part of it, I think, is, if I'm going to compare it to Undertale, Undertale's bullet hell is very carnal and intuitive. It's very primitive. We understand it deep in our soul. You're dodging things, don't get hit by things. Oh God, something scary is coming. It's back to our prey mentality. Minesweeper, very cerebral, right? You have to step out of your lizard brain and you have to think. And I make you do it on a timer. And it matters in the rest of the game, right? So fuck me, right? Of course, what's interesting about this is that it's optional. 95% of the time, you never have to play the minigame at all. At all. There's a couple events that'll pop up, like, hey, you got to play the minigame. But okay, you lose them, you're fine. I let players rely on RNG. I let players go, I want to roll the dice. I don't like playing the minigame. They don't do it. Whether they love the minigame, hate the minigame, doesn't matter. Every single player still goes through the path that makes them play the minigame. Sometimes they play the easier modes rather than the harder modes, but they still refuse to step into RNG, which tells me I was onto something. It tells me there is engagement there, and that players do like having a hand in their own fate. They just didn't like how I did it in some cases. Of course, visibility was very hard for me as well. I'm one man. I'm not very well at my past work, and I had a hard time kind of getting that, together and getting a lot of traction on the game. There's certainly a viral threshold that I can't meet. I have too many hats to wear, too many things to juggle to get done. And part of that is blog engagement was limited. I had that blog for 3 years, and it did well to a certain extent. It reached people. People enjoyed it. I would get comments on it, but it didn't reach a lot of people. Early on, I decided, where am I going to do my blog? I went with Tumblr. Now, Tumblr's an awesome community, and there's a lot of cool indie dev stuff happening on Tumblr. But it's all very cutesy. It's all very hyper-friendly and short, very soundbite kind of style stuff. They share GIFs, and that's it, right? And that's all you see of the games. You're like, check out what I'm working on. No explanation. No deep thought about the design. Just, this is what I'm working on. And so players are like, oh, that looks really cool. That's all I need to see. And they love it. I like to write big, long treatises on why I did something, and maybe I'll throw a picture in there. And people don't read that shit. So at least not on Tumblr. So that didn't work for me. I didn't connect with that audience. And it's also not a showy game, right? You saw the screenshots. You've seen the game. It doesn't it doesn't really smack you in the face and go, I'm pretty, play me. That makes it harder when I do share a GIF. But interestingly, it is very fun to watch if you're watching someone play it in an interactive kind of mode. And I'll talk more about that later. Of course, I did this zero budget. That has its own challenges. Anything that I couldn't find for free, or even if I felt like it, I made myself, reinvented the wheel many times. And it has this dark, somber aesthetic. I've talked about that a bit. And of course, it also has extremely high difficulty. I want to kick the player, and I want to keep kicking the player. And they go down, and I'm going to kick them again. I kind of loved, the Dark Souls kind of idea of, hey, get good, right? And the few options there are to change the difficulty in this game actually make it harder. So this has been, I've had a lot of pushback on this. I've had a lot of people going, I don't understand the game. You need to give me an easier mode before I figure it out. I'm like, well, but if I give you an easier mode, you'll burn through the content, and then you won't care to play the game, right? I want to make harder modes, right? That's what I want to do. That's a little selfish of me as a designer. For now, it's one difficulty, and I do mitigate that a little bit. But what this high difficulty means is there's a high skill ceiling. Players come in, they don't understand the game as normal, but there's a lot of depth for them to really explore if they go into it. It has a simple presentation. It looks like there's not a lot of sim going on. There's actually a lot going on under the hood. And I have this director, AI director. You guys would recognize kind of the concept from Left 4 Dead, where Left 4 Dead, when the players are doing well and they're bolting through the level, it throws more zombies at them, throws more specials at them, says, hey, you're going too fast. And then when they're like in trouble and they're limping and they're out of med kits and one player's down and everything like that, it slows the game down. It says, wait, let's give them a few more life spawns, let's give them some more ammo, let's give them a new gun. Let's not throw that, boomer at them. Let's just take a moment, right? So I took that idea and I said, okay, I want to do that to my players. I want to be an ass about it, but I want to do that to my players. So I added a director. And what the director's goal is to get you to lose the game between 40 and 70%. Its goal is, if you're limping along and you're having troubles, to give you a little boost. There's a few helpful events in the game. You can get a small amount of resources. You can get a fix for something that you need. But, of course, it's never enough, right? It's just enough to kind of just give you a little hope. On the other hand, when you're doing really well and you're burning through the game really fast and you're not having many troubles, well, I'm going to throw a lot of shit at you. So I think that was a lot of fun and actually worked really well. So something about this that I think is fascinating, because my goal was 40 to 70%. I find when I sit down and watch players play the game, players who can't get to 40%, and especially not consistently, don't understand the game yet. There's still something they haven't connected with. Usually players, the first couple of runs, that's where they're at. That's fine, right? There's a learning curve. That's expected. But when they're getting 40 to 70%, they can play the game. They understand the game. They're not good at it, but they get it. They can play the game, right? And they might even be enjoying the game at this point. After 70%, about 80% to 90%, if you can get to that amount, you can win the game. If you're dying there, you're just making small mistakes. You're just making, you messed up a couple events, or you were inefficient about your power management, something like that. That if you tighten that up, you tighten up your ship design, whatever, you can go all the way. And I think that was great. To me, it tells me a lot about where the player is and where their headspace is and how well they understand the game and how well the game has taught them. Another one, I talked about indirect control and how that kind of messes with players. The thing is with indirect control, players don't get it, right? You hit a button, you expect something to happen, right? Riot talked about this with League of Legends, where when the player hits a button and wants to use an ability, the ability should go off immediately. Don't have a casting time. If you have a casting time, what happens is players go, oh, it feels sluggish. Oh, I don't feel like the game is responding to me as a player. I want to impact the world. If you want to slow players down, you give them a cooldown. You kind of have a wind down animation. You do something like that. Same kind of idea here of when players want to interact with the world, it should be immediate. It should have an effect. That doesn't work with this game. It's a sim game. Decisions you make in the first 2 minutes can kill you 20 minutes later in a 30-minute game. That's most of the way through, right? And so there was definitely challenges there. And so part of this all kind of goes into that steep learning curve I was talking about. It is a full simulation game. On a smaller scale, it does do a lot of sim, and there's a lot to learn. Even players who get the game, even players who love the game, sit down and they go, for the first time, they go, oh, that's a lot to learn. That's a lot to throw at me. And this is something I was battling constantly. The tutorials were very hard. I had to iterate on them a bunch. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Part of this is also the Newtonian physics. So as gamers, we are used to games cheating, right? you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, oh yeah, hit the gas, I'm in space, and like, oh, I took off the gas and now I've stopped moving. No, that's not how space movement works. You fly and you keep flying. So I wanted to put that in, going back to that realism. So I did. The game has a false Newtonian physics. When your engines are on, they provide acceleration. It calculates it against the whole mass of your ship, and then it gives you a speed, and it builds that speed up. And when you cut the engines, you keep floating. Players don't get that. Players expect the game to lie to them. Blows my mind. And so they do figure it out. Advanced players will understand how to work with that and how to play that. And players who beat the game definitely have figured it out. But the first few runs, they're just like, huh? And they end up wasting a lot of resources. Part of the learning curve, which is a little bit of fun. But another issue was that I had no metagame for a long time. It was, you could play the game, you get any 7 endings, or 6 endings at the time, successful ones anyway, and there's always lots of losses. That kind of gave the players an incentive to kind of go back, design new ways to play the game, and challenge themselves. But giving that sandbox wasn't enough, especially new players. So what I found is when I added this mini game, I just, all right, you guys have all this content in front of you. You can access all of this stuff, and you're saying there's not enough. I'm going to take some of that away from you. I'm going to lock away a lot of the things that you're already using that you say aren't enough for you, and I'm going to make you earn them. And it worked wonderfully. Immediately, players felt like they were in a safer space, that they had progression, that they had a reason to keep playing the game. And ironically, some of the stuff I took out is actually detrimental to the player. They unlock it, and the game gets a little harder. But they feel like they're getting further when they unlock it. Most of it is actually helpful, but it creates more stuff going on, more stuff to track, more complicated, advanced ways to play the game. So I did mention all this learning curve stuff, all this metagame stuff. There's a failure in the direct tutorial. I was telling players how to play the game. I was saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then say, go! And you know what? They didn't get it. They would play the tutorial, and they go, I don't know what happened. I'm going to just play the real game. And they play the real game like, I can't handle this game. I'm out. And that's what happened with all those early access reviews. I had an awful tutorial. I had to revamp this thing a few times from the ground up. And finally, I landed on GuideBot, which is in the game now. GuideBot doesn't teach the player. Matter of fact, I still throw the player in and say sink or swim. What GuideBot does is he's a safety net. GuideBot's a little bit of an asshole. He teases the player, he taunts the player, he says, you fucked this up, and he stops the game. And he says, hey, you fucked this up. Like, you're about to die, don't suffocate your crew, hit this. And if a system's broken or something, the player has to go looking for it and go, all right, what system? But that's part of teaching. Players are like, oh, why doesn't it just tell me? Well, the game's not supposed to tell you these things. You're the omniscient artificial intelligence. Why are you not tracking everything that's happening on board? So he's an asshole about it, and he teaches you by kicking you, right? By telling you you messed up. And then he's great. Players tend to just turn him off very soon. They go, I can't stand this guy. But by the time they turn him off, they've figured out what the game's doing, right? And advanced players can still benefit from using him. They can turn him on, and he'll catch them if they make a mistake when they were distracted by something else. Obviously, I talk a lot, right? My game does the same thing. It's got a narrative element, and there were a lot of words in the narrative element, in the tutorial, in just the main gameplay. And what that meant was players' eyes would glaze over. And so that was always something I had to combat. I had to trim things down, had to do this. And then they would still go, all right, but there's not enough stuff for me to go read. I'm like, you're angry that you're reading too much. Like, I don't understand the problem. And it kind of ties in here, limited event content. There were only, and as right now, there's about 30 non-story initial points to go down branching paths. And they can pop up at any time, and they pop up in different orders every time. And you get one, and it goes, okay, choose between these things, and you can go into different directions with it. And they can change the game in different ways. However, there's actually a lot of content buried under all that, but there's only the 30 ways in to all of that content. So they see the same initial things again and again and again and again. which is something, this is one of those challenges that it kept getting pushed. On that timeline, I kept going, oh, the plus events, I'll do that next time. I'll do that next time. Oh, I'll do that next time. And I never got enough in. There was just a lot of writing to do, and never got there. There were some unexpected boons. So the game, I didn't see these things coming. Just a few that I liked. I'll go quickly through these. So female players like this game. Girl gamers think this game's the shit, and I don't know why. I didn't make this game for them. I didn't make it for guys or girls. I just didn't make it for them specifically. I went, hey, no, it's a dark game. It doesn't, it's kind of a mean game. It doesn't fit any of the stereotypes of what a girl would like, of what we think in the industry. Ends up, they love what I did, right? Maybe it's the nonviolence. Maybe it's a little bit of the more cerebral stuff. Maybe it's the social, simulation aspect. I don't know. Maybe it's the humor. I don't know. But they jam with it a lot better than male players. It's anecdotal statistics. I haven't calculated it, but roughly from what I've noticed, it's about 80 to 90% of women who go, that game looks interesting. I think I'm going to sit down and give it a try. They go, I really liked that, which is pretty damn good. This game's not going to catch a lot of people's eyes, but when it does, if they like it, that's fantastic. Versus about 60% of guys do that. 60% of guys go, I might like to play this. They play it, and they go, I liked that. The other 40% are like, nah, fuck this. I'm out. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And the girls get it just much faster. They just pick up the game. I don't understand it. Players think the game is funny and not too dreary and, my life sucks. I had a lot of depression going into this game. I talked about how, it's going to influence my work. And it did. You know what? The game's both. The game is at once just like, suck. And humanity sucks. And what we do to the world sucks. And it's also just like, haha, I shit in the fan again, right? And people love it. It works well. It also plays really well in interactive streams. So it doesn't work well in GIFs. It doesn't work well in videos. It doesn't work well in images. But when somebody's playing it and they're going back and forth with their audience and they're letting the audience taunt them, it really, really does well, which I think is fascinating. And it's something that I have a few ideas, if I have time down the line, of how to put more streaming tools and stuff in. And finally, I wrote some really weird lingo in the game for when the characters talk. This is a recent change. I end up rewriting all the dialogue. And I loved it. I was an English major in college, so I'm like, haha, I'm nerding out on words. How might people talk in 50 to 100 years? Like, they're going to sound weird. They're going to break our grammar as we understand it. And it's caused some streamers and stuff to really talk in funny voices, and I love it. I wouldn't have that if I had paid for voice acting, right? That whole experience would be gone. Of course, I probably should have paid for voice acting had I had the budget. That naturally, voice-acted games do better. So, what's the process? You got to dance a bit, right? You got to get out there. So, this is my secret view into my dark cave that I work in. I live in this room about 20 hours a day. Whether I'm sleeping, playing, working, or who knows what, right? That's enough of that. All right, I read a lot of lists. This is how I get through game development. I have an awful memory, and I find the best way to handle that is, I thought of something, right, and just write it down, just get it out, and then I'll come back to it later. I'll find it, I'll go, oh yeah, I can do that, haha. And when I'm feeling like working, I go, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and just march down the list. And this is just a small amount of the sheets that I had on my desk about 2 months before the game launched. And I threw them all away as I finished them over the whole course. So I still have a stack because I never finished a bunch of stuff, but that's how it goes. I also had lists on whiteboards. I wrote them out on whiteboards, and then I also had sticky notes to kind of track things. I had higher level stuff. I had deeper stuff. I had lists online on my progress tracker every day. When I get up in the morning, oh, did I brush my teeth? Yes. Did I do this in the game? No, but it's there and I can remember. And I also had to pay the bills every now and then. Beer money, gas money, and money to go back into the game. So I did a few other weird things. I did some temp work every now and then. I worked as a camp counselor and got to shoot little kids with laser guns. I did a little bit of work with local indie doing some level design. I also would go and shoot off explosives on government facilities. That's Miramar Air Base, and that's NASCO, where they build all of, the military ships. And I'm blowing things up and get paid for it. That was fun. So, with all of that, with a little bit of perseverance, yeah, right, a little bit of perseverance, and a little bit of goofiness, I managed to get through this whole cycle, and I released my fucking game. Hell yeah. Yeah, so we got there. All right. Thank you. Let's talk about that launch, right? How is it doing? Yes, these are the details you came for. I know it, right? Well, I talked about how in early access I got panned a bit by Steam reviews. Since launch, as of this talk, there are no new negative Steam reviews from launch to now. It's only been out 3 weeks, not a lot of players, but all of them have been positive, which is fantastic. And it ends up netting out to a mostly positive. Not enough to actually show up on the top where, it's like, no, not enough reviews, but, it's got enough to go, hey, you're doing well. Not everyone agrees. This is a guy I ridiculed on Twitter a couple nights ago. He jumped into one of my posts when I said, hey, I got an update, and I fixed some things, and I added better quality of life stuff, and then I also said, you guys suck at this game, get good. You're not going to win yet. And he's like, what? Get good? Why are you being mean to me? I'm not going to buy your game. All right, well, fine, don't buy my game. I also have negative reviews outside of Steam. This is probably the worst of them. This is by an online rag, and they reviewed it, and they hated it. They didn't understand it, to be fair, but that's fine. Not everyone's going to understand it, and they're going to not like it when they don't. So in this case, what was funny is when you're reading the whole main text, this is the end kind of summary, but in the whole text, they're going, hey, the game doesn't do this, and the game really needs to do this. And then the very next sentence, without fail, they would go, oh, but it does do it. I'm like, wait, you just don't understand that how that's effective. They didn't understand, and that's okay. You know what? I'm not going to beat them all. A lot of other people disagree, at least a few, 3 here. These are Steam curators that have all given it the thumbs up. Not people who are just players, but people who say, hey, you know what? This might be your jam. So that's pretty good. That's pretty inspiring to me. And here's the financials. Oh boy. So I sent out about 300 to 400 press keys over the course of early access to now. Successful, really bigger indies are usually doing an order of magnitude more than that. That is a very small amount of keys to be sending out. It's just a matter of bandwidth for me, right? Half of those have been activated, from what I can tell, and less than 10% of them have resulted in reviews. Again, there's that whole virality thing. Everyone's talking about Cuphead right now, right? So then everyone who's not talking about Cuphead has to go play Cuphead and talk about Cuphead. So I bet you they're getting closer to 50%, right, there. Whereas I'm just, la-di-da, I haven't hit that point. And probably won't, but it's still interesting to see. A few other articles there. About 10 to 20% of all those keys I gave out, I estimate, were fraudulent requests. Were people coming to me going, I want keys. And even when I gave them 1 key rather than the 10 keys they asked for, or when they only asked for 1 key. And I did my due diligence. I followed their social media, rabbit hole. I chased them down. I made sure they were a real person. I made sure they were behind a real site and that they were associated with that site. And that they were a reviewer and that all this was going to work. I researched every single fucking person I ever sent a key to. And Google thinks I'm a bot at this point. I've done so many recaptchas. And you know what? I still had 10 to 20% piracy and resale of my keys. So what I've done is I've started doing temporary press keys. If I didn't reach out to you, if you're not Markiplier, and I'm not going, hey, this is Markiplier's email address, or if you're not IGN, and I'm going, hey, this is the writer at IGN I want to talk to, I say, all right, any key you request from me is going to be temporary. So I revoked, at the beginning of the month, just now, a couple weeks ago, I revoked all of the press keys that had been released up until that point. I said, you know what? Screw it. If people are going to scam me out of keys, they're not going to make money off of it. And anyone who's doing it, who's really interested in this game, and a couple people have followed through on this, and they've said, hey, look, the key got revoked. I never got a chance to play. I'm like, oh, thank you for telling me. You're awesome. Have a key that you can keep forever. You're a real goddamn human being. Scammers don't know their keys were revoked until they sell them. And maybe they don't even know then. Reviewers go, go to boot up the game and go, I can't play the game. I need to fix this immediately. A scammer goes, I can walk away from this. I'm screwing 200 people today and another 200 tomorrow. A reviewer is very interested in what's going on. If they put the commitment in to ask for the key, and they put the commitment in to install the game, and they put the commitment into sitting down to do a review, and then that game doesn't work, they're going to want to do something about it. So that's cool. That actually is working for me, and we'll see how it goes. I also get a lot of spam to my tech support email address. Steam makes you put a little thing at the bottom if you have any issues with a game. And it's for players. It's a direct way for players to reach out to the dev. They have the forums, but they have to wait. They have to hope that the dev sees the forums and responds and stuff like that. This is a way for them to go, I need help. Your game doesn't work. I've got none of those emails from players. Instead, all I get to that email address is, hey, man, I have a group on Steam. My group on Steam has 100,000 users, and they would like 100 keys to just for free. And I promise you'll get a lot of press out of it. Let's not do that. So I blacklist all those people. If they ever email me again from any other circumstance, I'll go, no, you're an asshole, fuck off. So money. I've had 100 sales since launch. Now, caveat, this is an estimation. We're doing this talk a little early. I don't have the first official report for launch sales. What I do know is kind of a small kind of, guesstimate. About 40 to 50 of these were on the first weekend. Now, this is a small number. I think I heard somebody say Jesus back there, right? Yeah. What the fuck? And including early access, which was, again, very slow, in 10 months in early access, 300 sales. If I'm going to put that all together. Again, the game's only been out 3 weeks officially, but this is about 10 times less than I was expecting, and about 100 times less than I really wanted and hoped for, right? I dropped the ball. We've talked about the challenges I had, and the fact that I just don't have a lot of bandwidth to cover all of those grounds. The good news is the next check's going to get me even on costs. So the things I paid for, like the trailer, like the launch trailer, like my musician, that kind of stuff, I'm making that money back that I've put into this game at the end of the month. Bad news is I still need about 6,000 more sales at full price before I make minimum wage on all the hours I put into this game already. The upshot of that is about 6,000 people are following this game and want to buy sometime in the future. They have indicated that by wishlisting it or following me on itch or doing something like that. They just haven't bought yet. So these people are waiting for 50% off. These people are maybe waiting for 90% off or a humble bundle, right? But they want the game someday, which is good, right? There are people who are interested. I just need to grow that. I just haven't shown enough around yet. 40-ish of all the sales of the 300 have been charged back. I think that's actually 40-ish in addition to the 300. Now, of course, we've been talking about over the last year or two all the fraud that's going on in the industry where people are stealing credit cards, buying them on the dark web, and then buying games with these stolen credit cards on websites. And then what happens is the person who, they get the game, cool, they go resell the key, right? And they dump it on G2A and stuff like that. And then the person whose credit card it is goes, this isn't my thing, and they do a chargeback. They go, I didn't buy this. My card was stolen. This is fraud. Fair. All right, right? But what happens is then the card company goes, hey, you're the person that we can track down. You're the end of the money trail that we can chase. So they go to the dev and they go, we're charging you a fee, and we also want the money back. And so it's not only piracy, it's a fuck you to devs, right? It's a I'm going to take money that you're not making out of your pocket. Good news is Steam's really good about handling this. They pocket that extra shit. They just go, hey, you're not going to make the money on that sale. We'll walk away there. We're all cool. I suspect not all of those are fraudulent, however. I know this game is weird, and we've gone over that. And I'm sure, and I know at least a few people have gone, nah, this game's not for me, I'm out. That's fine, whatever, you know what, that's cool. If they're not gonna shit on it in a review and then bounce, we're cool. I have applied to about 10 festivals and competitions and stuff like that, not including like, stuff where I'm just showcasing. All of those, most of those were during early access. All of them except for IGF 2018 have rejected me outright. Never got finalists, or at least they never told me, anything like that. Again, it was early access. The game's really come a long way since then. Crossing my fingers for IGF 2018, but again, I'm going up against Cuphead. So yeah, good luck there. But yeah, you know, that's part of the process. It happens. You got to put yourself out there anyway. You get a thick hide for it. So was it a success? I got 300 sales and I'm making my money back. Yes, it absolutely was a fucking success. Hell yeah. I didn't go into this to get rich. I would love to get rich off of this, but that's not why I'm here. This is about me building myself up to the next thing where I do make money or whatever, you know, jump into a job. Or just challenge myself in other ways. It has done a lot for me. It's my first Steam release. I did mobile releases before this. This is the biggest project I've ever done. 3 years, before that it was 1. And I did it all myself. It opened many doors. I'm here today because I made this game, right? I'm part of the IGDA because I was making this game, and about halfway through I'm like, I don't know people doing this. I need to meet people who are doing this. And I came out and started hanging out with people who were doing this, and eventually got involved. And it's gotten me job offers. It's gotten me this and that, which is very exciting. It's allowed me to challenge myself consistently. I've been pushing myself constantly. I love to learn, and this was the best way to do it, right? It also taught me about my own capabilities, where my limits were, and where things were just effortless for me. And it also reminded me, I really hate being alone. I really hate doing stuff by myself. This was fun. Glad I did it. Let's go join a team, right? And of course, it will also survive as a piece of my artistic expression forever. It's in the world. From now on, it can only get more sales. From now on, only more people can have seen it. From now on, it can only go up. Maybe I put some more hours in. Maybe I put some more money in. But what are those to that, right? So that's huge for me. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. That's weird. All right. This was Destination Aries. This was my talk. Thank you for coming out. And here's some social stuff. I will take a couple questions if people are interested. I went over a lot, probably talked your ears off. But yeah, let's chat. Anybody got a question? I'll also take one from there. Thank you. E. Yeah, sure. So the question is, for the mic, for the stream, my trailer was good. Can I talk about the process on how it got there and how that all came together? I originally made my own trailer in early access. I can use Premiere. I'm just an awful actor. And I did the VO for it, and I did all this other stuff. And I just really kind of didn't have a good aesthetic for film. And it was an awful trailer. It's still in the world. That's fine. Maybe some people like it more than the other. But I realized for launch I needed something that was really going to stick, right? A trailer is very important if you're going to catch somebody. So I went out and I got a recommendation from Robert. And Robert said, hey, I know these guys over at Trailer Squad. They will do it. Give discounts for indies. And so I reached out to them, and they were wonderful to work with. They found the voice talent, and they gave me a whole range of options. They said, these are our 6 best or 5 best plus, you know, yeah. And I'm like, oh, OK, that's great. Thank you for sorting that. And I picked the one I liked, and then walked through them the whole process. And it ended up being a fantastic price as well for the time that they put in and for the level that they gave me at the end, right? I highly recommend them, or just, you know, letting somebody else do that work. You know, if that's not your specialty, accept that, like, you're not going to be great at everything. You know, sometimes I'm trying too hard on that. So. Did they write the script? They did write the script. So I gave them some guidelines, and I ended up like editing it for them. But yeah, they handled all of that, and they let me have as much directorial control as I wanted, which was great because I just said, hey, do your thing. Do we have any questions online? No?
Online? No, I'll ask them.
Okay, yeah. And we'll wait for that. Anybody in here? No? Well, that's fine. We can be done. I'll give it a minute for them. So when I was making, I originally had a really ugly kind of logo and graphic, like for the name for the game, and this was a lot of fun to make. People are always like, what? This is so weird. It is. It's weird. But that's fine. It's memorable. It's abstract. Yeah, you know, red rocket to the red planet, whatever. It's an A for Aries. Who cares? A lot of fun. Yeah, I will say, so that you notice there's a red gradient on it on the A, and then there's a little red gradient inside the white circle. Don't do that in a logo that you want elsewhere. I got stamps for WGF, like literal like stamps, like ink stamps that I was using for things, and I used that symbol. But that's a gradient, right? That doesn't convert to yes or no stamp, right? And it's also only in white. You can't make that black because of the red, right? So it always has to be on a dark background. And it looks weird if you do anything else with it. So yeah, lesson learned. Really cool fucking looking like title and logo, but it has some limitations. And the best ones will always allow you to kind of put it on any background and putting it in any space.
We got a question. How did you get away with being nocturnal with your parents around?
How did I get away with being nocturnal with my parents around? I mean, I'm an adult, thankfully. I'm 28 years old. God damn it. You know, we'd finally settled that, you know, that I'm not a teenager some time ago. I don't know. You know, I mean, I would take care of the things that I needed to take care of on my own time, and we would still meet together. We still do meet together, usually every night for dinner, and kind of like touch base then. There are some headaches that get involved. I don't have a car, right? So we're always sharing cars and having to balance all of that. You know, I can't have people over, you know, especially, you know, romantic friends. But, you know, I also, you know, you know, there's little challenges like that. I get knocks on the doors, like, open the door, like, I'm working here, leave me alone. But you know, it's fine. You know, I think there were a lot of benefits for it, and I'm glad to have done it. I'm still excited to be back and independent. I missed that, but hey, it worked. Yeah. For new developers, what would I have done differently? Well, if there was something that I wasn't interested in learning, why bother learning it? I put myself through the ringer on a lot of things, but like, just like, there's asset store shit. Like I used Unity. You can buy a lot of this shit, right? I made it all myself. Why did I do that? I liked a lot of it, but there was plenty there that was just like, okay, I was dumb for doing that. I caused myself more problems, and I caused myself more bugs for doing it myself, right? It's the same idea behind, you know, security architecture. You never write a private security system. You use like open source where everyone can check it, and you know, when you're using public-private key, you know, information. Because if you make a mistake in a bug, you have a vulnerability, right? If I make a mistake in a bug, I don't have a security vulnerability, but I have a thing in the game that somebody else could have avoided, and I just spent a week trying to figure out. So if you're not actively trying to learn it, and you don't care to learn it, and you always expect when you go on from here to let somebody else do that job, let somebody else do that job now. Thanks for the question.
At what point did at any point your depression catch up to you where it was just too overwhelming, and you know, how did you deal with that?
So yes, the question was, sorry, what point did my depression, or at any point did my depression, you guys heard it, but they didn't. At any point did my depression catch up with me and, you know, really impact development? Yes, there were a few months in that whole cycle that I just took off completely, that I just said, I can't do this. At one point, I had a big falling out with a friend, and it left me wrecked for about 6 months. It just sent me down a spiral. I got suicidal. And just combined with the fact that like I had all this anxiety about making my game, I just tapped out. I just said, hey, you know what? Like I'll work when I can, but most days were a battle to do anything. So yeah, it definitely bit me. But I mean, it's doable, and it's part of the process. A lot of us have to face those things, and I think I'm stronger for owning that. I hope I'm stronger for owning that. And you know what? I know I feel better for having gotten through it and for making this happen anyway, right? But yeah, Thanks for the question. I will take one more question, and we'll call it done, whether from online or in here, whoever's first. Yes? Yes. So the question is did I throw away any major design elements over the course of development? And I hope you mean, of course, not just revamped like, oh, this didn't work, like the tutorial or like the minigame where I just threw it away and made it again. But you mean like, did I ever go, hey, this doesn't belong in the game? Yeah, there were quite a few things like that. Of course, a work of art is only finished when you can't take anything else out, right? Is the way the saying goes. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I should think of an example to finish answering this question. I definitely pulled out stuff involving like socialization with the crew. The crew will like interact a little bit. For the most part, they kind of just do their own thing and ignore each other. And that was something that I kind of want to add down the line, but it just didn't make sense at the time. I also had a big thing where I built a lot of the game around future mod support, where players could add to the game. They could put their own storylines in. I mean, they already can build their own ships, but like they could just go ham, right? And I worked on that for 3 months, and then I worked on it again for a month way down the line. And each time I said, no, this isn't going to happen right now. This is a post-launch thing if I do it. And I still kind of built my architecture around. Maybe I'll get there. But definitely was. Sometimes it was just too challenging. All right, thank you for the question, everybody, and thank you for coming out. Stickers.